Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our concepts edition for the week, where we talk about big picture ideas and concepts. I'm Devin Bedoni.
And I'm Uriel Eisen.
You want to hit us with your quote?
Oh, yeah. Plans are things that change. Fujio Cho, chairman of Toyota, from Toyota Kata. Hilarious.
I laughed out loud when I read this, sitting alone by myself. Because
Nice.
It's almost like, well, it's hard to say exactly what's being said here, but it's like he's stating that to be a plan, it must be something that, like, that's the definition of plans, like that they can't be static, sort of, and it just kind of, flips the whole,
Right.
the whole way we think about plans on its head if you like approach it from that.
Yeah. I mean, there's the famous planning is essential, but plans are useless. I think Eisenhower. About like going to war. But yeah, I think it's an interesting, there's an interesting mix in Toyota of heavy, intense planning, but then also, I mean, the way they talk about it is building a nervous system into a corporation. Mm-hmm. So like there's the whole concept of if you touch something that's hot, you have local nerve reactions that make your hand pull back before you yell ow.
Sure.
Right. And there's an analogy, I think it's in the Toyota production system by Ono, where he talks about it like a corporation. If you have to wait for that signal to get all the way up to the head to come up with a plan to send it all the way back down to the hand to move, you're going to get pretty injured.
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, there's a recognition that planning is just impossible in a funny way, like essential but impossible.
Right.
They also say like plan for 80% of the time and then execute 20%. And so like maybe those are two different types of planning, or maybe
it's just this. Maybe it is like just the simplicity of it is that you have to plan, and you can't think of plans as static.
Here's another interpretation, is that planning is essential, but plans are useless. Like the act of planning is key, but once you develop a plan, it's like it can't become a static thing, sort of, right? Like the second you codify it and write it down, that's when it's a problem. But yeah, this is hilarious.
Yeah. What is it?
Plans are things that change.
The plan is dead. Long live the plans.
I also love how just like concise that is. Plans are things that change.
Go ruminate on that for 6 weeks.
Excellent. All right. You have some big juicy things. Maybe we should jump into some of those.
Yeah. So a couple just like personal experience things that might be helpful to share. I tried the block scheduling thing that you recommended.
Yeah.
And like, wow.
Right? I've been having the same thing. This week has been so productive.
I was blown away. It's such a simple concept.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like I already did that. And then I actually did it. And I was like, I have not been doing that.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome. You're like, look at the clock. Yeah. Look at the task. You're like, I can do this in half an hour. Yeah. I don't think I'm doing it as proactively as I could be. Like at the beginning of the day, I'm not laying out my day into like this many hours and then laying my tasks in, which I think is probably the next step.
That's basically what I'm doing.
Okay.
Like,
so you're doing it better.
Well, I don't know. Doing it
probably
the way it works for the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like after a brief morning thing, I'm basically looking at my basic to-do list and saying, okay, I'm going to give myself 9:30 to 11 to do this task, 11 to 2 to do this task.
Interesting.
Etc. And what I've kind of found is I think there's like multiple things going on. We're such interesting, weird creatures. The psychology of what's going on is, I don't know. I think there's two big things for me. One is that knowing that I have a block later to do the other thing that needs to get done, it allows me to focus more intensely on the current task. Where I think a lot of times during the day, I'm doing kind of a whack-a-mole thing, so I'm worried that I won't be able to get to everything, so I try and do a little bit of everything at once.
Yeah.
And so instead of that and being like, okay, I'm just going to program parts from now until 2, and I'm going to stop at 2, so I know I'm going to have time to do that next thing, allows me to really, like, I just close my email, flip my phone over so I can't see notifications and just kind of go to town.
Interesting.
Not to say I don't have any distractions and it's not, I'm not 100% pure. So Yeah, I think that is a big part of it. Is for me personally was like knowing that there is a window in which I can attend to those other tasks, and I've been getting through things much faster.
Interesting. Yeah, so I can totally see that. The other piece, I think the advantage of laying out your whole day is that you more clearly understand what's going to happen if you run overtime. Yeah. You're like, oh, now I'm going to not get that other task done, which is also critical.
Yeah. There was another part of it, which is like, I think often when I'd had a big list, I'd sometimes find it overwhelming, and I would get into programming parts, for example, and be like, okay, I got these 3 parts to program. It's this amorphous thing, and it'd be very easy for it to I'd be like, yeah, it's going to take a while. And then, it takes a while because you don't have like a clear goal for when you're going to try to be done by to kind of compare your progress against.
So what I've been doing essentially is at the beginning of the day, I have a big to-do list, and then I've been taking I have been taking the step of like, here are the top 3 things I would need to get done today.
Yeah.
And I have a rough idea. I haven't been laying them out. I think I should start doing that. But I've really found just like checking the clock at the beginning of the task, saying, okay, how long, like, okay, I want to be done with this by 11:30.
Yeah.
It just, it makes it less overwhelming because it's not just, as you're saying, like an amorphous task that you have to finish, but like it will take some amount of time and then you'll be done. It's like, okay, I can do this for half an hour. Great. Let me dive into this. And then it also, really lights a fire where like writing an email and then there's like an attachment and you realize you need to edit the document and, they cascade, and sometimes that can just turn into you being like, okay, I'll take care of this later. You can just look at the clock and be like, I have 15 minutes. I can totally get that finished and wrapped up and sent. So I've found it really, really quite powerful.
Wild. Yeah. I found myself like kind of getting into my stretch goals each day and being like, what is going on?
That's awesome.
Not to say everything is dealt with, but still like getting through a block that I'd set for like admin work and being like, I still got 15 minutes.
Damn.
I'm gonna do something.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. The other personal thing, and again, a psychology of motivation and how we manage ourselves and is very interesting. I tried your morning 3S instead of midday or afternoon.
Yeah.
Also,
I think that's Jay Pearson.
Yeah. Well, you suggested it last week or mentioned that you were doing it. And I think, I'm not exactly sure why, but my sort of like theory is in running a business and in business in general, it's very easy to just like fall into a completely reactive state, which can be really demoralizing. And just like that feeling of like always being sort of behind the ball.
Yeah.
And I think coming in the morning and taking a half hour to be proactive really sort of like just changes the initial outlook for the whole day.
Interesting.
Not to say that bad things don't happen, but I don't know. I've just been finding it to be myself to be in a very different mindset after that. And little things like, we got our shop up to a state where we could run and make parts again, but there was still a lot of stuff scattered to be dealt with. And being able to just come in and be like, okay, I've got half an hour. I'm going to take 15 minutes of that half hour to do this little section of the floor or whatever, put these things away.
Yeah.
Just been like picking away at it, and it's been super helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I guess to connect the two, actually, giving yourself a chunk of time does, like, similarly, I feel like when you go in and you're like, okay, let's make the shop cleaner, that's pretty overwhelming.
Yeah.
But if you're like, let's do some cleaning for 15 minutes, that is very achievable, and you can always find something that you can spend 15 minutes to make a little better.
Yeah.
And I suspect that if everyone was doing that in the business every single day, the place would look pretty amazing. Yeah. My shop doesn't, and we're not there yet.
Well, so. I mean, also not to throw yourself under the bus, like, your shop has come a long way, and every time I walk in now compared to 2 years ago, it's like, damn.
Yeah, I guess when you're in it, it's hard to see that.
Yeah.
Okay, I think there needs to be a name. Write in with suggestions. No, there needs to be a name for the type of, so if you've used an X-Acto blade, there needs to be a name for the type of, so when if you've used an X-Acto blade, every time I change an X-Acto blade, I am astounded by how sharp they are.
Yeah.
Because they dull slowly, right? And so you never realize how good it was. You never remember.
Yeah.
And then every time you change it, you're like, wow, that is amazing. Similarly, like if the shop gets cleaner over time, but you don't see, it's hard to notice.
Were we talking about this last week on the pod?
Like heating a frog in water?
Yeah, the good version of a frog boiling in water.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So, there's the bad side too of like things deteriorating slowly and you forget how good they can be.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's like lifestyle creep or scope creep, but in a positive direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, both of those were great.
That's awesome.
Thanks for the suggestions.
Yeah.
And then this sort of, on the motivation front, been reading Toyota Kata again the last week. And the author, Mike Rother, was kind of the whole book is about sort of the PDA cycle and he's not referring to it as the A3 process, but having done the reading that you and I have done at this point, I'm like, this is the meat and potatoes of the A3 process. Mm-hmm. You can sort of apparently skip the whole A3 part, maybe.
Right.
But this is
like everything, it's
piece.
Just a way to achieve a goal.
Yeah. And he mentioned that a lot of people critique Toyota for their problem-solving methodology as being something that only, kind of applies in a controlled system and that it wouldn't work well in crisis scenarios. But then the author points out that, like, when there is a crisis, this is exactly how people respond, actually.
Interesting. Right. What's going on now?
Yeah.
What do we know?
Yeah.
Interesting.
What's happening now? What do we know about our current condition? Where are we trying to get to? And how quickly can we make this happen? And I just thought that was interesting because I feel like always being in a crisis is terrible.
Right.
That's not a healthy place to exist. Whether it's a self-generated crisis or a real crisis, like, physically it's not good for your body to be super stressed out all the time.
Yeah.
And generally people don't like being around you. But, my experience has always been that, like, under a hard deadline or in a crisis, like, I can get a lot of stuff done. And it was interesting to think about this as sort of like a pathway between those two of being like, remove the crisis, because that's not helpful with self-generated crisis, but maintain that motivation. And I think that's, again, where this Toyota improvement kata thing is kind of like filling this big hole and this big blank on, like, how to motivate people and engage people in a way that's, like, very real and invigorating without it being stress induced, basically.
Interesting. I'm not quite sure I follow. Like, how do you see that applying? Does it give you, because there are steps and progress? And
I think because there's targets, because there's goals and there's excitement and there's, like, again, like you're talking about with cleaning, it's like if you just come in and say clean the shop, like, that's not a very motivating, exciting, stressful, it can be a stressful thing.
Yeah.
If you're like, we're gonna get this section of floor
back
shining, or just back.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's easy. That's something to get excited about.
Right.
And
you achieve it also.
Yeah. There's a sense of achievement.
I guess that's success. True. The other side of having a structure, not that it needs to be rigid, but that you can perceive forward. You can perceive progress even if it's a non-linear problem, right? Like, I don't know, shoveling a pile of dirt, there's at least, like, you can see how much there's left or how much you did. But I think a lot of things, like growing a business or something like that, it's very amorphous.
Right.
Like, you can sort of see progress, but it's kind of hard day to day or definitely hour to hour.
Yeah.
And so I think, thinking about those phases of projects and stuff and sort of benchmarking things that way, I feel like makes you realize that you are making headway, even if, like, for me, I've been talking a lot about, like, product development. I think one of the hard things is that, and I think I definitely have some ideas for how to improve this, different people's recommendations. but it's hard to perceive the forward motion until, like, the goal is to have a finished product.
Yeah.
But that's binary. You either do or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole, 6-8 months leading up to that,
right,
you're like, well, it's not finished. Damn. Like, what are the steps I need to take? But you can't feel progress. Whereas I feel like a lot of the tools in Toyota Kata, it lays out sort of a roadmap a bit, and you can be like, all right, we have identified the current condition, and like we're satisfied with that definition. And
yeah. Or even, it kind of, there's the reference to like the gray area in the Toyota Kata, which is like,
okay, I should probably reread it.
It's like everything between where you are and the target condition, basically. And that the concept being that, like, if you try and chart a path, make a plan, that you will not hit your target because you're going through unknown territory, basically. And that creating these small loops and small targets within that is kind of the only way to effectively navigate those unknowns, like you're talking about.
Interesting, right?
From concept of new product to it exists and we are selling it.
Interesting. That's funny.
Tons of gray area there.
There's a strong analogy of like PDCA loops to the acronym just slipped out of my head.
For which?
For like an oven thermal control.
Oh.
Is
oh no, now it's gone in my head too.
God. Write in if you know the answer. No.
Iterative PID loop.
PID loops, yes. And there's different speed PID loops, right? Yeah. And the problem is if it's way long, which I think is most companies, the PDCA or PID loop is like the length of the project. Yeah. Right. And this is a way to get it way down. And the nice thing is you find out if you're off course. Yeah. Way sooner.
Yeah. Which one thing like I'm really appreciating about this book is so much of so many of the lean and TPS books is just like very high level conceptual stuff without a lot of, I mean, there's practical, like Shigeo has some practical stuff relating to physical, production processes. But in terms of the management side, most of it's very high level without like a lot of like, here's how you can apply. And in this book, he's basically like, these things you should be able to test and know within a week to like 4 weeks at most. Like anything longer than that, and you are lost in the weeds. And
I like that.
This is going to be non-functional, which is really also, it's like, it's made it feel much more approachable as well. I think the last few weeks we've been very much like in the weeds of just like coming out of this moving fog and soup. And we have a lot of just kind of like housekeeping stuff to deal with, but I'm sort of coming out of it like, okay, we can start to tackle some stuff now with this tool.
That's exciting.
Especially knowing that we can take bite-sized chunks and like really break things down in a way that's much more conceivable and just easy to approach.
What do you think about applying the idea of I'm seeing a bit of a theme between like time, what is it called? Like time chunking or time boxing or something.
Oh, block scheduling.
Block scheduling and like these BDCA loops. Of just of like confining, like creating structure essentially for different aspects of things. There's also some similarity to like reducing WIP, right? Yeah. Rather than working on 5 tasks sort of spread out throughout the day. It's like, all right, this hour I'm doing this thing. Yeah. The next 3 hours I'll be doing a different thing. What do you think? Do you think that could be applied to like, I wonder, I feel like it would be useful to apply it to like a general business plan. Like I feel like right now I have these useful amorphous target conditions for the business. Yeah. But I'm not sort of breaking it down and saying, okay, the next 3 months we're going to be doing this activity that I feel like is a core piece of the business and it makes sense to tackle now. After that, we'll be going after this one. And like, sure, you might change those priorities, but I feel like right now I just have this sort of list of things in my head that are going to be very important to growing the business. Yeah. And that feels a little crazy making because you're always very aware of the ones you're not working on in a funny way, instead of being like, yeah, of course I'm not working on it because it's not time yet. You know? Maggie said something interesting to me a while ago about like budgeting. We were talking about a budget for a project, and she was like, well, what's the target? And I was like, well, she was like, is it less? I was like, yeah, I guess. Like, how much less can we do? And she's like, no, that's crazy. Like, you can't say your target is to spend less because you can never get there, right? And I feel like similarly, it's just a little crazy making to not have specific targets because you're always behind schedule in a funny way.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a schedule. So you're just like,
right,
why isn't this implemented? Why isn't this ready? Why isn't...
It's kind of the difference between like a dream or a goal and a plan.
I guess, yeah, but without putting there's no... I've noticed this thing where like you're self-employed, there's sort of less... The only deadlines are external, which is ridiculous, right? Because like my internal goals are actually more critical to the long-term success of the business than any one customer. But it's like, oh man, we haven't shipped their order. We have to ship it next week. What are the things we need to do? But I feel like I should be applying the same rigor to like, we want to hit this revenue target, or we want to have this product launched or whatever. When is that going to happen? Not it's going to squeeze in amongst all the other activities. Like, when is that shipping?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
No.
Need more hard targets, I feel like.
Yeah. It seems like an ongoing theme, and this block scheduling thing kind of falls in the same theme. The ongoing theme of the improvement kata is having something to compare against. And whether that's a deadline or a block of time that you are using or a pile of dirt that you're trying to move from one place to another.
Yeah.
I think it's a big part of it is just having some point of comparison. Mm-hmm. It doesn't even have to be a good point.
Yeah. And I think that's a unifying, like that's also the point of, I think SOPs are very misunderstood as like a rigid, you have to do it this way, instead of exactly what you're saying, which is just, this is the standard. It's probably bad. Yeah. But now we know how we're meant to do it. Excuse me.
Well, it's like, you know how it's bad. Now you can figure out how it's bad. Not just know that
and say
somewhere
step 3 is bad.
Yeah.
Instead of everyone is doing step 3 slightly differently. And so no one is really converging on a good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this was last episode. We talked about flossing every night.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have read every single night. It does work. When I'm too tired to read, I read anyway. So I've been reading through some of Shigeo Shingo's books. And something that struck me a little a couple nights ago is that, okay, so I'll just read a little excerpt. It's very short. Basically, it's on the waste of overproduction. Mm-hmm. And he distinguishes between 2 types of overproduction. So there is quantitative, making more products than is needed. And I feel like that is the standard
definition or standard understanding
of overproduction. And the other one is
easy to quantify,
is early, making product before it is needed. And so he says I'm not going to read the first one, but on the second point of making products early, defining that as overproduction. On the other hand, if 5,000 pieces are ordered for delivery on December 20th, but produced by December 15th, that is early overproduction. Many managers are concerned only about preventing quantitative overproduction. They don't care that 20 days worth of inventory is being held and managed, as long as products are produced to the order. At Toyota Motors, early overproduction is not tolerated. The method used to eliminate it is just-in-time production. I feel like I have two takeaways. One is most of these books are filled with really basic things written in very simple, like some of Shigeo Shingo's chapters are like half a page. Yeah. It's like a chapter on eliminating screws. or eliminating turning screws unnecessarily in SMED. There's a chapter on that. It's like 3 pages.
Yeah.
And it's like, here's all I have to say. And it feels, how do I say this? It's like, it's weird to have such a impactful book filled with such basic stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of this stuff is really basic, but people skip the basics, including me, right? It's like,
I think it's simple in concept, and it's like terribly complex in application.
Certainly that. But it is very useful to just like, I think like nailing the basics. It's amazing how much you can improve. Yeah. Another example of this is like improvement, like starting improvement with improving process instead of improving operations. I think the temptation is to overcomplicate. The temptation is to go like, okay, let's buy an automatic warehousing, like shelving unit, instead of saying like, well, what are we storing and can we eliminate storing it, or buying a conveyor belt to get things from here to there. It's like, great, it's gonna be so much faster, instead of saying, well, can we rearrange the shop? Right? Because that feels, I mean, it feels more daunting.
Yeah.
It's also sort of less obvious.
Yeah.
But you've sort of messed up the basics and now are just polishing a bad thing with like money.
Right. Yeah, we had an interesting experience this morning. I'm just, trying to apply these principles on the daily, trying to understand them and figure out how we can work with them.
Yeah.
This isn't directly related to overproduction, but more to like perspective and how we choose to change things. So we are having a brief discussion about storing boxes. So mundane, right? Like so simple.
Yeah.
We recycle a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I don't know, just we're talking about standardizing buying some boxes in standard sizes, but I think we will continue to keep using recycled boxes.
Recycling in that way. Like you get something, you receive something in a box, and then you use it to ship something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good boxes.
Right.
But storing them has been a hassle. So this morning, Ariel was like, I think we should start breaking these down and put them in like a vertical, we'll flatten them and put them in a rack. And I was kind of like, in the back of my head, I was kind of like, I don't want to build that rack right now. Or put money towards it, especially if this is a short-term thing. And I don't think it makes sense for you to be spending a lot of time breaking down boxes,
right, to
then put them back together. So I was like, well, what's the end goal here? Like, what's our target? Ooh la la.
Wise Devin.
The target is to be able to find the size box you need quickly without a lot of, because right now we've been like nesting small boxes in sequentially larger boxes,
right,
for compactness sake. And I was like, well, how about we just make some lane, like we're not space constrained right now. Let's just make some lanes on the floor, and you can just put all of one size box in one lane and the next size box in the other lane, and it'll be right next to you, and we can sort of test this theory and see if it's actually helpful.
Oh, nice.
And then eventually, if we start buying in standard size boxes, those can either go in that lane or they'll go in something that stores them more space efficiently. But like right now, this is the goal. The goal here is so you don't have to spend as much time
rummaging,
dealing with boxes, not how do we mitigate our storage problem.
Yeah. Interesting.
So it's just like trying to flip my own thinking on its head.
Totally. No, I mean, that's cool to take a second and go like, what's the goal? Because it's so easy to jump to solutions. But to finish out the overproduction thing, I think in my looking around the shop and just thinking about waste, I think it is easy to miss that second definition of overproduction, which is making stuff too soon. And it sort of gets back to thinking about inventory as an asset rather than a liability. Yeah. But then, as you said, like, you mean simple in concept. Inventory is a liability, not an asset. Right. Yeah. Anyway, in applying that to our shop and thinking through overproduction, I think, it's very easy to view stuff being done early as sort of something checked off the list. But to your point about like simple in practice, simple in theory, complicated in practice, our mill was making a bunch of rejects on our one of our parts. So they were just dumping out the back, and then we broke an end mill because they're lifting out of the Op2 jaws. And so I need to machine new ones, but now we can't machine those parts. And so I was sort of thinking, okay, do we Kanban our soft jaws and have soft jaw blanks and code that is like ready to roll? Or do you machine soft jaws so you can immediately just switch them out and hit go? And I feel like there's merits to each.
Yeah.
And also the amount of extra storage in this case is minimal. But we are moving in the wrong direction, theoretically.
Right.
So anyway, I have to go make those jaws after this podcast. So it's not a settled thing which way to go.
But it is top of mind.
Very top of mind, but also illustrative of the fact that these things are very complicated to try to nail down.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I guess my thought in just saying it out loud is I should probably just treat the code for making soft jaws as production code and have that defined and on the control.
Yeah.
And so it's just like listed out and then have blanks, because those blanks can feed any part.
That's what I would say.
So maybe that's the answer.
Yeah. And the other, if the underlying goal is not to invest time, money, etc. into a thing before you need it.
Right.
Because of all of the myriad reasons. Like there's a decently high this is definitely splitting hairs since it's just soft jaws, but it is a good conceptual use case. There's a decently high probability that you might change that product before those soft jaws need to be reused or brought into use, or that you might change your approach, and the soft jaws will be there's in not infinite but nearly infinite ways that those can become irrelevant.
Yeah, so by that logic also maybe I shouldn't even stock blanks. Maybe I should stock maybe I shouldn't machine soft jaw blanks. Maybe I should just be soft jaw stock, because then I can tweak the size or any
I think that comes back to the how stable is the process thing.
Well, okay, this was a huge win. I think I mentioned a few weeks ago I took the time to make the soft jaw. Now the soft jaws live in our production tooling. They have their program to make soft jaw blanks. And I just made some blanks in 20 minutes. It was great instead of it being a whole project. So that part is quite stable. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think could go all the way stock to finished.
I think if you are comfortable locking down your soft jaw size, that's beneficial to have them on hand because of the downtime savings.
Right.
But again, it's sort of like the how close to the sun do you want to fly? With your just in time,
and maybe the title of this episode.
yeah, for sure. I'm curious about your conversation here on.
Oh yeah,
it falls right in, but inventory and reordering and stock sizing and.
Yes. Yeah. So this was very interesting. I was trying to figure out with a new product whether to do. I think I mentioned this last episode. Yeah. So whether to do standardized stock or whether to size the stock to the parts very precisely. Standardization is a theme in Lean, right? 5S'ing, sort, sweep, standardize, and some other ones.
What are those other ones?
I don't know.
My wife the other day was like, "What's 3S?" And I was like, "It's this." There's a 5S too. Oh, what's that? No idea.
Sort, sweep, standardize. I don't know. I think, didn't Toyota go back to 4S'ing? Because sustain is the last one, and they were like, that's a given. Anyway.
Sort, set and order, shine, standardize, and sustain. Yeah.
Okay. Shine. Different than, okay. Yeah.
This is
so you just sort of collapse them.
Different translation. I think shine is the same as sweep.
Okay.
Or, God, I don't know.
Anyway.
Can't keep track.
So the question was whether to standardize the stock or to get it right on for each part.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke to a number of people, actually, you being one of them. Andrew at Henry Holsters, and then I spoke to Josh at the Holstery, different types of holsters.
Yeah.
And a very nice thing he said, which I thought was quite useful, basically breaking out. He was basically like, well, you can Kaizen the wastes that are going to be created by managing more than one stock size. But it's going to be hard to Kaizen the wastes associated with cutting blocks that are oversized for your parts, like wasted material. You're going to have longer cycle times on your machine. You're going to be scooping out more chips from the back of the machine.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all wastes associated with having a standard stock size that both parts are coming out of.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the wastes of having two stock sizes that I need to manage can be like, there's tools for that. Like Kanban is one, right? Like reducing the amount of time you're spending managing inventory. Another would be like, there's ways of improving that to reduce the wastes associated with that option. But there isn't really a way of reducing the wastes of the first option, because without just going to the second option.
Sure.
So I just thought that was a nice way of approaching like a choice of just like which way is going to be more conducive to improvement later.
Interesting.
I mean, are you going to say like, well, you can improve the wastes of that one? Like scooping chips out of the back, or?
Well, sure. Yeah. There are improvements to be made there. Yeah. It's not a binary, but the other part of my gut reaction is that is true, but if the first option is a less wasteful starting point, like you might only be Kaizening up to the point at which you already were.
That's true.
With this other option.
Right.
So I don't know enough about the specifics to be able to quantify that.
Right.
But
that's a good point. Right. Like one might be so much more wasteful that you're going to be working at it for years to get it to be.
Sure, or the waste might be more in your particular process, might have more cascading effects, like you are labor constrained. So like and
space constrained.
And but I guess what I was going to say is that like anything that adds to your management overhead right now, at least, is like a major burden, whereas like chips are not your bottleneck.
Right. True.
So like I could see this as a large scaling process going the other way. We're definitely getting into the weeds on your specific process here. I think it's a very valid point. And I think it's just important to not again become like rote about being like, well, this is waste I can deal with, and then start yourselves like 6 steps back.
True. This gets like into I guess like theory of constraints, right? Like address the bottleneck. Improve the bottleneck. Optimize for the bottleneck. That's a good point. Adjacent to that, also from the same conversation, was around pricing and a consideration. I mean, it's always a consideration, but just like pricing products and how you want them to be, priced in the market. There was a question of sort of like how, there's I forget the name of the curve, but basically for each dollar you increase the price, there's going to be some theoretical drop off of how many customers you're going to have. But just like trying to optimize your pricing for volume to give you more budget for improving. Right. Like if you make one of something a year, it's going to be hard to pay off any improvements you make to that process. Anyway, so like just as another lever to be played with and something to be optimized for is like volume is good. I mean, a big part of Japanese production, which I think sort of shocked the Western world, was quality at a very low price. Right. Like before that, it was sort of like, well, you get what you pay for. And they kind of flipped that paradigm on its head because they were shipping really good stuff at lower prices than the West could produce. I don't know why I'm using the word the West
at
the time.
At the time.
Yeah. So
for sure. Yeah. And it seems like finding the right point on that bell curve or whatever the curve might look like.
Right.
Where you're still profitable, but can maximize your volume potential is the key part.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to break that down a little bit, like you're saying that volume is good because even if your margin per piece is lower, your total margin in the business that you can dedicate to improvements is larger just because there's a bigger like hose of cash coming through the business that you can
I think there's that
smidge off.
Yeah. And like buying a robot, if that robot is going to run for half an hour every week, it's going to be hard to justify the price of a robot. And so you might be stuck at a less efficient way of producing because there's just not the total project budget.
You just can't invest in the efficiencies.
Yeah. Like if you're flowing $2 million through a line and someone says this robot is 100,000 and increases the throughput of your line, you're like, great, sign me up. Right. But if the throughput annually is 100,000, paying 100,000 in is kind of rough.
Yeah. As much as we all would love to do it anyway.
And sometimes do. Yeah.
Interesting. I had one last little thing here, again, with having something to compare to, measurements. I hired somebody.
Nice.
Yeah. That's what this relates to.
That's awesome.
I was trying to figure out if I could hire somebody.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was doing accounting, which is not my forte or something I like to do.
Yeah.
Very much. I like to refer to myself as a reluctant business person. Anyway, it was very interesting. This wasn't like the big piece of the whole accounting puzzle, but I'd made a budget. I've made several budgets recently.
Not trying to brag.
No. Yeah. What can I say? And my gut estimates that I'd put in the budget for what we spend on tooling and both consumable and like improving our fixed work holding and all that kind of stuff were off by 6 to 8 times.
Wow.
In the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And it was curious because I wouldn't have known that really if I hadn't actually like gone back through and kind of like tried to pick the numbers apart and see where we were spending money and how much we had to work with.
Right.
This is sounding so obvious now that I'm saying it out loud. It's very embarrassing. But just coming back to the fact that money is an easy thing to measure.
Yeah.
So it's important to do it there. But taking the same principle and applying it other ways, I think it's important not to work just off your gut because it's very often wrong. Mm-hmm. Like I know that we reinvest a lot and I know that we buy tooling. I had no idea it was that much. And I think there's probably things all over the business that are like that, not money related and not money related. Being like, and we've talked about this a bunch, being like, what kind of parts do you do? That's actually not what I thought we did.
Right.
But I have to actually go and measure them to find out.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I had a similar thing. So I did 2022 taxes.
Yeah.
And just like going through and tallying everything and looking at what we're reinvesting in the business and whatnot. Because in the moment, you're making these small decisions that make sense.
Yeah.
But you're doing it, like to your point, you're doing it with no target condition. You're doing it with no goals. You're not like, there's a lot of room for improvement for sure for me to sort of lay out, here's our plan this year. Mm-hmm. Here's some of the big tools that are probably going to be good to have. I think I just have like a general sense of direction, which also has its benefits. Like I don't want to write that off because like I feel like I'm coming out of the early phase of this business of like, does this have legs at all? Mm-hmm. And so I don't know, like spending a ton of time on minutia doesn't make a ton of sense. Yeah. Anyway. But that's interesting. So you said it as a premise to like target conditions. Is that sort of what you're thinking? Is like
just generally moving from having something.
Did you go and see?
I did go and see exactly. Yeah,
nice.
The fifth part of the PDCA loop.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Toyota put it in the middle, which actually is interesting. Apparently, the whole PDCA concept came from the West. Actually.
Yeah.
I forget the name of the fellow.
Yeah, there's a lot of that where it's like we want a system and an acronym, and I mean even like lean, right? We just named something else.
Right. Well, this was saying that not just the name, but like the concept was like introduced by an industrialist from Britain, I think, into Japan in like the late 30s or early 40s. Well, probably couldn't have been the early 40s. Maybe it was the late 40s.
So he got arrested. Yeah.
But I think it wasn't really applied in the same way. It was more of like a management principle, not so much like we're going to go and do this with stuff every day.
Interesting.
Kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But it's the 4 plan, do, checked, act. And then Toyota added go and see into the middle of this, like whatever, they make it a little circle as like the confirmation and like the testing to make sure that it's actually continuing to function.
Yeah. There's a lot of value in going and seeing.
Yeah.
For sure. It's funny how easy it is to skip. I think to your point of like go and see how much you're spending on tooling.
Yeah.
Across the board, or like, I don't know. There's a lot of that. Like we talk about ideas and it's like, well, have you built a spreadsheet to just like sort of game plan that out?
I know. Yeah.
And then the answer is almost always no. Yeah. And every time I do it, I'm like, that took me 45 minutes and was so interesting, not only in the conclusions, but even in filling it out and coming up with what cells should be in here. You're just like, oh, here are the levers. Like here are the important, I don't know. Anyway. Yeah. Go and do it. I don't know. Yeah.
It's a good place to finish up for today.
For sure.
Thanks everyone for listening. Once again, as always.
Yep.
You can find me on Instagram at lichen_MFG, on the interwebs, lichenprecision.com.
And you can find me at austere_manufacturing on Instagram and austeremfg.com, and the podcast at Incremental CI. And we have a Patreon. And share this with a friend if you think they will enjoy it. We're trying to...
Yeah, don't share it if you don't think they'll like it.
That's true. Yeah, but if you think of someone who would benefit or just enjoy the process and the thinking and sort of contributing to this effort, which is getting better at running a business.
Yeah.
Something like that. Send it to them, please.
Make manufacturing viable.
Something. Yeah.
All right. We'll catch you later.